Where are we?
This is Mark McNeese in New York City, and you're listening to another edition of Live Mic with Mark. Welcome to the podcast, everybody. This is Mark, and my guest tonight is a return guest, I believe, for the third time, and hopefully will be returning many more times because I love his columns about retiring and his website, RetireFabulously.com. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Dave Hughes. Dave, how are you?
I'm doing great, Mark, and thank you again for having me on. I really enjoy this.
I do too, and for people who have not heard you before or read your columns, where are you? Just let people know where you live.
Sure. I live in Chandler, Arizona, which is a suburb of Phoenix, and this is where I've lived for about the past 19 years. I was born and raised in Ohio and had lived in the Washington, D.C. area for about 11 years, but I'm now a proud Phoenician.
Is that what they're called?
Yes.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I would have thought maybe Phoenixians or something.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't know if there's a word for people who live in Chandler or not. Maybe we're just not big enough for our own word yet.
Now, later when we get toward the end, I'll ask you about officiating, because I know you officiate weddings now. So I want to let people know all of those things. But tonight we're going to talk about something that I hope I'll be dealing with soon, which is transitioning from work to retirement, specifically the last few weeks and what people can expect those last few weeks, and also maybe like the first 6 months of retirement. So let's go for it.
Sure. So, let's start with your final days of work. And mine were very interesting, and I don't know whether my experience is atypical of what many other people experience or whether it's very common. But what happened in my case is I actually ended up retiring about 3 to 3.5 years earlier than my original target. And that was because my company offered a very attractive early retirement package. I think they wanted to thin the herd a little bit of those of us who were getting up there in seniority. So they put together a very nice package and offered it. And I decided to take it. And I made that decision around July, and I decided that my last day would be December 31st of 2013, because that was the last day you could take it under this program. And so I told my boss in August, because she sat me down and we were going to have one of those career conversations that you bosses and employees have every so often. And I didn't feel like I wanted to go through a facade of thinking, yes, I'm going to be working 5 more years here.
Yeah.
I thought, it's time to be honest with her and tell her that I was going to retire at the end of the year. And in hindsight, that was a huge mistake.
Really?
Almost immediately, I was almost made irrelevant. I was written off as a short-timer. Oh, he's not going to be around much longer. Oh, he's not really thinking about work anymore. He's just counting the days until he can be retired. I don't know if she and maybe her management thought that or at least felt it, but it was immediately, it was weird. I mean, within a week, an organizational announcement went out, and like I was managing a team of people, and they were transitioned to a new manager, and they had given me 2 or 3 little projects just to kind of work on until my last day there. And that was really unsettling and really surprising. And so there was that. But, I think every retiree probably does deal with a little bit of short-timer syndrome. Mm-hmm. And as you don't do, many times we do the work that we do thinking that we are building a career and building our body of work and our reputation and our accomplishments for the year. And when you get to that point where retirement is on the horizon, it is easy to think, you know what? Why? We don't have those goals anymore. The goals really are for December 31st to hurry up and get here. But I think my management assumed that I would feel that way a lot more than I did. I mean, I was looking forward to contributing pretty much right up until the holidays,
Mm-hmm.
My first bit of advice is don't give too much advance notice when you're ready to retire, because you may be sort of mentally written off from that point until you actually go.
Well, I was wondering, listening to you, it sounds like you work for a larger company.
Yes, I work for a large corporation.
Right. So if you're like me and you're working for a company that has 6 people,
Mm-hmm.
9 total, and your boss is the HR contact, it's kind of hard to set up retirement and not tell them.
Right.
Unless it were like giving notice and you waited until maybe a month and said, by the way, I'm retiring at the end of the month or something.
Yeah, and of course I couldn't even have signed up for this program without my boss knowing about it. In fact, they required us to give 3 months notice. But I guess my whole point here is just to be mindful of the fact that from the day you announce your retirement until you leave, you might be sort of sidelined or marginalized more than you expect.
Yeah.
Now, hopefully that doesn't happen to you, but I mean, in your case, when you're part of a company of 6 people, your manager might start thinking about, well, let's hire your replacement. Let's get your replacement on board and train him or her and all that stuff. And where does that leave you after your replacement is trained? So, to some extent, this may be inevitable, but at least know that it's going to come.
Yes, and another thing that came to mind was I worked at Reuters for a decade. That was a massive company, but a lot of reporters and others who reached a certain age were pushed out, and I often will detect resentment from people who felt that they were retired rather than that they retired.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's true. But so let's talk for a little bit about the actual transition and then what you can expect in your first 6 months to a year.
Sure.
So one thing that I noticed and that I also have read some good research on is that on the one hand, you may look at retirement as being like one of the greatest thresholds of your life that you'll cross. You finally get to kiss the work world goodbye and have your life completely in your hands the way you want it from this point on. And that's all true. And that really is a great feeling. It's wonderful. But the other thing is that this can also be the most stressful time of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why. I mean, normally we think of stress as the feeling you're under when bad things are happening to you or when difficult or trying circumstances are happening to you, like you have a loved one who is being treated for a serious disease, or your marriage is in trouble, or a death in the family or something like that. But sometimes stress happens anytime something in our life changes, even if it's a very good change. Mm-hmm. For example, moving to another city. Even if you're very excited to be moving to that city and you're looking forward to it and you realize it's going to be a great thing, the stress of everything that's part of moving, is stressful. And even things like starting your marriage or going off to college or starting a new job that are very good things in your life do represent a lot of change, and they can be very stressful. And if you think about it, when you retire, in many ways, there are more things changing at once than any other time in your life.
Mm-hmm.
Your daily schedule is going to change. Now you don't have to get up, you don't have to go into work. If you've been thriving upon having a schedule of a 9 o'clock meeting, a 10 o'clock meeting, lunchtime at this time, other things that you do at appointed times during the day, suddenly you don't have that structure anymore.
Mm-hmm.
The people who are in your daily life change. Your job title changes, meaning you don't have one,
Yeah.
probably. And for a lot of people, they attach a lot of their self-validation to their job title, especially if it has something like, senior or vice president of this and it.
Or executive, if it has the word executive in it.
Oh yeah, that confers a certain amount of importance and power and so forth, and suddenly you don't have that anymore. Your surroundings change unless you've already been working from home. Your relationship with your spouse is going to change, and that's one thing Jeff and I have dealt with a lot. Is that as much as we love each other, we were used to seeing each other on evenings and weekends. Now we see each other all the time. And there's some adjustment there, as much as I love them, sometimes a little space is good, and so your relationship with money changes, your friends change, especially if a lot of the people who were your friends were also co-workers. Just a lot of things change all at once. And so in that point, retirement can be really stressful.
Yeah. Well, I've had periods in my life where I worked from home, a couple years writing television scripts, and I did find that structure, even though I was not retired, became an issue because I would finish, and I imagine that would be the case now too, even though I always say I don't want to sit in an office anymore. I want to stay home and do all of the stuff I do. But I'm still going to be done by 11 o'clock in the morning, and or 12. So I can imagine that structure is a problem for a lot of people, and especially those people we hear about who retire and then die a year later.
Mm-hmm.
Because they don't know what to do with themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And I had one person who reads my website write to me and say, do I have to give up my schedule when I stop working? He says, I really like having a schedule. I thrive on having my day and my time organized and all that. And I said, well, no, nobody's forcing you to give up a schedule. If you like having a schedule in your life, have one. But the nice thing is it's your choice. It's not a choice that's imposed by external forces.
Now, I wanted to ask you about something that I think is a little related to the first part of the transitioning out of a work life, especially for people who are heavily identified with their jobs and they love their jobs. I would have felt that way at one time. The job I have now, I will miss for maybe 90 seconds. I'm not if that long. And I'm not being negative. It's just not a job I'm going to miss.
Right.
There's nothing interesting about it, but I was what I'm getting at is an element of grief, and the sense that some people may feel that, okay, I'm old now, it's over, and I'm leaving my job. And have you had any experience or correspondence or anything like that with people about that sense of loss? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. In my case, I didn't feel that at all. And I'll explain why in a minute. But I do know for many people that's one of the biggest problems. And I think for everybody who is still working, who may be listening to this, ask yourself, how much do you tie your identity to what it is you do? You're an engineer, or you're a writer or an editor or a teacher or doctor or whatever. How much do you identify yourself with what you do? And to me, I've never been that completely invested. I haven't had my identity completely invested in that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, also a musician. I'm also a husband. I'm also a writer, that sort of thing. And I think one of the big things that I encourage people to do as they look forward to their retirement is to answer the question, if you meet somebody at a party and they ask you, what do you do? How will you answer that question?
Oh, that's really good.
You say, well, I'm a retired engineer, or I'm a retired this, or will you say, I'm a writer, or, as I say now, I'm a wedding officiant,
Yeah.
or, and how are you going to identify yourself? And we've talked about this in a previous podcast, but I sort of coined the use of the word renaissance to describe our retirement instead of our retirement, because you can redefine who you are and what you're going to be and what contribution you're going to make, even if it's just a hobby that you pursue with a lot of passion. Say, I'm an artist, or even I may volunteer for this. But think about how you're going to identify yourself. And I think that will make it easier to transition from, I am a, whatever your career is, to I am a, and that's, what you want to be now.
I like that a lot. And I will make sure Frank listens to this.
Okay.
Because he's someone who, and I've talked to you about that before. He doesn't really know what he wants to do, but this would be a good one of many good tools to say, okay, well, how will I introduce myself if somebody asks me that question? What will I tell them? I like that a lot. Now, do you have any parting thoughts on these subjects?
Well, maybe the one other thing I wanted to touch on was this. So once you actually get started in your, whether you want to call it your retirement or your leisure time or whatever, I've read differing opinions on what you should do. Some people say totally disconnect for even up to 6 months. Just turn off the alarm clock, get up every day, do what you want, like totally decompress, totally disconnect. Just give yourself that time. For me, that wasn't going to work. For one thing, I had several things that I really wanted to embark upon and spend more time doing once I retired. And even though I do incorporate a certain amount of leisure and flexibility into my life and into each day, I think I would really go up a wall and get bored really quickly if I just did nothing for a while. And that's pretty much up to each person. I mean, if your job was really stressful and you were working 60 or 8 hours a week, maybe totally disconnecting and decompressing is what you need. But personally, I was ready to get going in all these new things I wanted to do. So, and just one other tiny little piece of advice, because I know what happened to somebody else who was retiring from my company the same time I did. People don't take a lengthy vacation as soon as you leave work. I mean, a week or two is fine, but I know one person who was going to take off for 3 months and travel around the world. And what happens, though, is that you have a lot of lingering paperwork to finish, whether it's rolling over your investments or setting up your payments out of your pension or your 401k or whatever, transitioning your health insurance to whatever you're going to be using now. There's actually a lot of paperwork and a lot of things to get done in the first month or two after you leave work. So I always encourage people not to schedule a big vacation right away.
Okay. That's good advice too.
Okay.
Let people know where they can, your URL, your website.
Sure.
And just mention your officiant.
Sure.
That.
So my website is RetireFabulously.com. Pretty easy to remember. And in fact, for all the readers of lgbtSr&nbsp, as Mark is very kind to publish most of the articles that I write, and there are always links to my website from there too.
Yes.
the last thing that you asked me to touch on here, and this has been kind of interesting, a new Renaissance career presented itself to me about 6 months ago that I actually didn't even anticipate at the time I left work. One of the things that I really wanted to do after I left my job was to start freelancing as a presentation skills trainer and coach, because I've been doing a lot of that in my job, and I'm a distinguished Toastmaster and Toastmaster, that sort of thing. And so I spent most of the first year trying to get that off the ground and make that work and so forth, and it just wasn't happening. And around October, two of my best friends asked if I would officiate their wedding, just out of the clear blue sky. And they thought, well, not only am I a close friend of theirs, but I have good presentation skills. I'm good up in front of people, and they thought I would be really good to officiate their wedding. So, of course, I said yes, and I started digging in right away as to, well, how does one officiate a wedding? And I did a lot of research for that on the internet, and got ordained, which you can do online in about 30 seconds or less, and totally legal. And so I officiated their wedding. And even as we were driving up to the place where the wedding was going to be, my husband, Jeff, turned to me and he said, you know, I have this feeling that this is going to be the start of something really good for you. And sure enough, a number of people in the audience came up to either my friends who were getting married or me and said, wow, you did a great job. I can't believe you're not a professional. That was just great. And another couple who were friends of ours said, we're planning to get married in January. Would you officiate our wedding? I said, well, okay. And what happened also is 1 week before my friend's wedding is the day that marriage equality came to Arizona. That was October 13th, 2014. And so I thought, wait a minute, I'll bet there are a ton of gay couples out there that are going to be looking to get married now that we can do it legally. So I got a domain and set up a website and put myself out there and got listed on several business directory type websites for the gay community here in Phoenix, and the business just started pouring in. And I've been at it 6 months now. I've done about 40 weddings. I've got another dozen or so on the schedule for the coming weeks and months, and I keep getting more requests, every week. So this has ended up being a Renaissance career that I hadn't even thought of. And so I think the lesson to be taken away is, it's great to have goals and something you're aiming for to do, but also just keep your eyes open and keep yourself open to the possibilities that may present themselves, and go for it.
Well, I think that's a great story, and I'm really happy for you, and it makes me think maybe there's something out there for me when the time comes that I am not even thinking about right now. Is there that's a different URL?
Yes, that URL, thanks for asking, is ceremoniesbydave.com.
Good. I'm going to look that up.
Yeah, and I'm certainly happy. All my weddings so far have been in the Phoenix area, but I'm certainly open to doing destination weddings, but that greatly increased the cost. I don't know that.
I bet you would like that.
Oh, yeah.
You would like a few destination weddings.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, it's been really good to talk to you again. I hope you'll come back on in a month or so, and because we've got a nice list of topics, and there are plenty more. So
I think we have more to talk about. So I really look forward to our next chat.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Say hello to Jeff.
Right, and say hello to Frank for me.
I will, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, thanks.
Bye.